The rain-hammered highway, 17, like the world was trying to wash something away. Chen should have kept driving. Any sane person would have. It was past midnight. He'd worked a 14-hour shift, and his own check engine light had been glowing amber for 3 weeks, a problem he couldn't afford to fix while keeping his father's shop from drowning in debt. But there it was, a silver sedan on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking like a desperate heartbeat, and Marcus had never been good at ignoring people who needed help. He pulled over, his ancient pickup shuddering in protest. The woman who emerged from the car was soaked through, dark hair plastered to her face, wearing jeans and a plain sweater that clung to her from the rain. No jewelry, no designer labels. Nothing that would suggest her last name appeared on hospital wings and university buildings across 3 states. She looked terrified. She looked human. "I'm so sorry," she said, voice shaking against the thunder. "My phone died, and I don't know what's wrong. It just stopped." Marcus grabbed his toolkit from the truck bed, rain instantly soaking through his work shirt. "Let's take a look." He didn't ask her name. Didn't ask where she was going at midnight on a deserted highway. Just popped the hood and got to work, his hands moving with the practiced grace of someone who'd spent his whole life fixing broken things, even when he couldn't fix his own life falling apart. Corroded battery terminal. Simple fix. 20 minutes and she'd be gone. "You're a lifesaver," she said, watching him work with an intensity that should have told him something. "I was starting to think no one would stop." "Most people wouldn't," Marcus admitted, tightening the connection. "Can't really blame them. World's not always kind to good intentions. But you stopped." He shrugged, testing the ignition. The engine purred to life. "My dad used to say people are more important than convenience. Guess it stuck." She stared at him for a long moment, rain streaming between them. "How much do I owe you?" Marcus closed her hood, exhaustion settling into his bones. "Get home safe. That's payment enough. I can't just." "You can." He smiled, already heading back to his truck. "Pay it forward sometime." He drove away without looking back, never knowing that Sofia Castellano would spend the next 3 weeks tracking him down. Never knowing her father controlled a charitable empire worth billions. Never knowing that his refusal to accept payment from a stranger would set in motion events that would either save him or destroy the last thing he had left of his father. Some people see a broken-down car on a rainy highway. Chen saw someone who needed help. That single choice was about to shatter everything he thought he knew about his life. The world was trying to wash something away. Chen should have kept driving. Any sane person would have. It was past midnight. He'd worked a 14-hour shift, and his own check engine light had been glowing amber for 3 weeks, a problem he couldn't afford to fix while keeping his father's shop from drowning in debt. But there it was, a silver sedan on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking like a desperate heartbeat, and Marcus had never been good at ignoring people who needed help. He pulled over, his ancient pickup shuddering in protest. The woman who emerged from the car was soaked through, dark hair plastered to her face, wearing jeans and a plain sweater that clung to her from the rain. No jewelry, no designer labels. Nothing that would suggest her last name appeared on hospital wings and university buildings across 3 states. She looked terrified. She looked human. "I'm so sorry," she said, voice shaking against the thunder. "My phone died, and I don't know what's wrong. It just stopped." Marcus grabbed his toolkit from the truck bed, rain instantly soaking through his work shirt. "Let's take a look." He didn't ask her name. Didn't ask where she was going at midnight on a deserted highway. Just popped the hood and got to work, his hands moving with the practiced grace of someone who'd spent his whole life fixing broken things, even when he couldn't fix his own life falling apart. Corroded battery terminal. Simple fix. 20 minutes and she'd be gone. "You're a lifesaver," she said, watching him work with an intensity that should have told him something. "I was starting to think no one would stop." "Most people wouldn't," Marcus admitted, tightening the connection. "Can't really blame them. World's not always kind to good intentions. But you stopped." He shrugged, testing the ignition. The engine purred to life. "My dad used to say people are more important than convenience. Guess it stuck." She stared at him for a long moment, rain streaming between them. "How much do I owe you?" Marcus closed her hood, exhaustion settling into his bones. "Get home safe. That's payment enough. I can't just." "You can." He smiled, already heading back to his truck. Pay it forward sometime. He drove away without looking back, never knowing that Sofia Castellano would spend the next 3 weeks tracking him down. Never knowing her father controlled a charitable empire worth billions. Never knowing that his refusal to accept payment from a stranger would set in motion events that would either save him or destroy the last thing he had left of his father. Some people see a broken-down car on a rainy highway. Marcus Chen saw someone who needed help. That single choice was about to shatter everything he thought he knew about his life. The taillights of the silver sedan disappeared into the storm, swallowed by rain and darkness, and Marcus sat in his truck for a moment, letting the heater blast against his numb fingers. The vinyl seat beneath him had a tear he'd been meaning to fix for 2 years. The floor mat was held down with duct tape. His father would have been mortified. "Sorry, Dad," Marcus muttered, putting the truck in gear. The drive back to Chen's auto repair took another 20 minutes, through sheets of rain that turned the road into a river. By the time he pulled into the alley behind the shop, it was nearly 1 in the morning. The building looked worse in the dark. A squat brick structure with faded paint and a neon sign that only half worked, spelling out CHNZO in stuttering red letters. He kept meaning to fix that too. The apartment above the shop was accessed through a side door that stuck in humid weather. Marcus had to shoulder it open, his wet clothes making him shiver as he climbed the narrow stairs. The apartment was small, a studio really, with a kitchenette that consisted of a hot plate and a mini fridge, a bathroom where the shower only worked if you jiggled the handle just right, and a futon that had seen better decades. But it was his, or it would be, for another 3 months anyway. Marcus peeled off his soaked clothes and stood under the weak stream of lukewarm water, watching grease and rain circle the drain. His shoulders ached from leaning over the woman's engine. His knuckles were scraped raw. There was a bruise forming on his left shin from where he banged it against her bumper. All of it for free, for a stranger he'd never see again. His phone buzzed on the bathroom counter. A text from Miguel, his assistant. "Mrs. Rodriguez coming early tomorrow." Transmission. Marcus closed his eyes. Mrs. Rodriguez paid in tamales and whatever cash she could scrape together from her housekeeping jobs. The transmission job would take 4 hours minimum, and she'd probably give him $40 and apologize that it wasn't more. He'd smile and take it and pretend it was enough, because turning her away meant turning away everything his father had built this place to be. He dried off with a threadbare towel and collapsed onto the futon without bothering to pull it out into a bed. The ceiling had a water stain shaped like South America that he'd been monitoring for leaks. His father's toolbox sat in the corner, the red paint chipped and faded, initials RC still visible on the side. Roberto Chen. Gone 4 years now, leaving Marcus with a legacy he couldn't afford to keep and couldn't bear to lose. Sleep came in fragments between thunderclaps. Morning arrived too early, announced by his phone alarm blaring at 5:30. Marcus dragged himself upright, muscles protesting, and made instant coffee in a chipped mug that said, "World's Best Dad." A Father's Day gift he'd given his old man when he was 12. He stared at it while the coffee cooled, remembering his father's laugh, the way Roberto's hands had been permanently stained with engine oil, the patience he'd shown teaching Marcus the difference between a socket wrench and a box wrench. "A mechanic fixes cars," Roberto used to say, "but a good mechanic fixes lives. You remember that, Mijo?" Marcus remembered. That was the problem. By 6 a.m. he was downstairs, flipping on lights in the service bay. The shop smelled like oil and metal and decades of hard work. 2 lifts, both functional but ancient. A workbench covered in tools organized exactly the way his father had kept them. A small waiting area with plastic chairs and a coffee maker that worked about half the time. On the wall, framed photos, Roberto shaking hands with the mayor after fixing the fire chief's truck for free. Roberto teaching a high school auto shop class. Roberto and 10-year-old Marcus, both grinning and covered in grease. Miguel arrived at 6:30, a skinny 22-year-old with an apprentice's enthusiasm and a quick mind for engines. "Morning, boss." Mrs. Rodriguez texted. "She'll be here by 7. "I know. You get the transmission fluid." "Got it yesterday." Miguel hesitated. "Marcus, you know she can't really pay what that job's worth." "I know. And you know we got bills." "I know, Miguel." Marcus softened his tone. "I know. We'll make it work." Miguel nodded, unconvinced, and started prepping the bay. He was a good kid, deserved better than the poverty wages Marcus could offer. But Miguel stayed anyway, said he was learning more here than any fancy tech school could teach him. Marcus suspected Miguel's loyalty had more to do with Miguel's own father walking out when he was 12, and Marcus being the closest thing to a mentor he'd found. Mrs. Rodriguez arrived at 7 sharp in her ancient Honda Civic, worry etched into every line of her face. "Marcus Mijo, I'm so sorry to bother you, but the car, it makes this terrible sound." "We'll take care of it, Mrs. Rodriguez. Don't worry." She pressed a Tupperware container into his hands. "Tamales. Fresh this morning. And I have $60, is that? That's perfect. We'll have her running smooth by noon." The relief in her eyes made the lie worth it. $60 wouldn't cover parts, let alone labor. But Mrs. Rodriguez cleaned houses to support 3 grandchildren after her daughter died, and Marcus wasn't going to be the person who told her she couldn't afford to get to work. He handed the tamales to Miguel. "Breakfast. Let's get started." The transmission job took until 1 in the afternoon. While they worked, 3 other customers came and went, an oil change, a brake inspection, a mysterious rattling noise that turned out to be a loose heat shield. Normal jobs. Paying jobs. The kind that kept the lights on. Except the lights were barely staying on. During his lunch break, Marcus sat in the office, really just a closet with a desk, and opened the envelope he'd been avoiding for 3 days. Bank of America. Business account statement. He didn't need to read past the first line. Amount due, $8,347. Payment 60 days overdue. There were other envelopes. The electric company, the parts supplier, the property tax notice. Marcus spread them across the desk like a losing poker hand, adding numbers in his head until the sum made him feel sick. He was drowning, and every act of kindness was another weight tied to his ankles. His phone rang. Unknown number. Chen's auto. Silence, then a woman's voice. Familiar somehow. "Hi, I'm calling too. This might sound strange, but I'm trying to reach the mechanic who helped me last night on Highway 17. Marcus sat up straighter. "That was me. I wanted to thank you properly. You wouldn't take payment, but I'd like to at least buy you coffee or something. You saved me from a really terrible night." He should have said no. He had work to do, bills to juggle, a business to save. But there was something in her voice, genuine warmth, maybe, or the memory of how scared she'd looked in the rain. "Coffee sounds good," he heard himself say. "Tomorrow? There's a diner on 5th Street, Rosie's." "I know it. What time?" "Noon. I'll be there." She thanked him again and hung up. Marcus stared at his phone, a strange flutter in his chest that had nothing to do with the overdue bills staring up at him from the desk. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Another storm rolling in. Marcus closed the envelopes without paying any of them and went back to work. The next morning arrived with pale sunlight that made the shop's problems more visible. Marcus noticed the cracks spreading across the front window as he unlocked the door, the rust bleeding through the frame of the garage bay, the oil stain on the concrete that had been there so long it was practically part of the foundation. In good light, Chen's auto repair looked exactly like what it was, a dying monument to a better time. He started the coffee maker, it cooperated today, and began his morning routine. Sweep the bay, check the schedule, review parts inventory, count the cash in the register, which took approximately 15 seconds because there were 3 20s and a handful of singles. The mail slot clanged. More envelopes hit the floor. Marcus left them there. Miguel showed up at 7 with dark circles under his eyes. "My mom's not feeling good. Might need to leave early if she gets worse. Take whatever time you need. Family first." "I know, but we got that brake job at 9 and the tire rotation. I'll handle it. Your mom okay?" Miguel shrugged with the particular helplessness of someone who couldn't afford the answer. "She won't see a doctor. Says it's just a cold." Marcus knew that dance. His own father had just a cold, right up until the pneumonia put him in the hospital, and by then the medical bills were already catastrophic. Roberto Chen had spent his last 6 months worrying more about the debt he'd leave his son than the cancer eating through his lungs. "If she needs to see someone, let me know. We'll figure it out." Miguel's eyes got shiny. "Thanks, boss." The brake job arrived on time, a soccer mom in a minivan with 3 kids who treated the waiting room like a jungle gym. Marcus let them raid the vending machine he kept stocked despite losing money on it, because kids shouldn't have to be bored while their parents worried about car repairs. While he worked, he listened to the mother on her phone, negotiating payment plans for what sounded like her own medical bills. Everyone was drowning. Marcus was just drowning with better company. Around 10:30, he took a break and finally confronted the mail. Electric bill, $340, due in 5 days. Parts supplier, $1,200, account suspended until payment received. Property insurance, $890, lapsed coverage notice. And at the bottom, a thick envelope from First National Bank that he already knew would ruin his day. He opened it anyway. Final notice, foreclosure proceedings. The words blurred together. 60 days delinquent. Loan acceleration. Total amount due immediately, $47,000. Failure to remit payment within 30 days would result in seizure of property and assets. 30 days. Marcus read it twice, then carefully folded the letter and placed it in the desk drawer next to all the others he'd been collecting like horrible trading cards. His hands were steady. That surprised him. He'd expected shaking, maybe tears, definitely panic. Instead, he felt a strange calm, the way people probably feel when they stop swimming and just let themselves sink. He pulled out the bottom drawer and removed the photo album his father had kept. Leather-bound, pages yellowing, full of the shop's history. Roberto as a young man standing in front of the grand opening, beaming with pride. The first customer, old Mr. Yamamoto, shaking Roberto's hand. Pictures from community events. The shop sponsored Little League teams, donated to school fundraisers, fixed police cars for free after budget cuts. There was a newspaper clipping from 15 years ago, local mechanic's heart, as big as his toolbox. The article detailed how Roberto had spent an entire Thanksgiving weekend fixing vehicles for families who couldn't afford repairs, asking nothing in return except that they pay it forward someday. "We fix more than cars, Mijo," Roberto had said 100 times, 1,000 times. "We fix lives. We fix trust. Someone comes in here, scared their car won't start, and they'll lose their job. We fix that fear. Someone comes in here after another shop told them it'd cost $2,000 and we tell them the truth. $50 and an honest day's work. We fix their faith in people. You understand?" Marcus had understood. Still understood. That was why this hurt so much. He flipped to the last page of the album. A photo taken 6 months before Roberto died. Father and son standing in the bay, arms around each other's shoulders, both wearing matching Chen's auto shirts that Roberto had made. His father looked thin already, the cancer stealing him in increments, but his smile was genuine. On the back, in Roberto's handwriting, "Marcus, this place was never about the building. It's about what we do inside it. Make me proud, son. Love, Dad." Marcus closed the album and pressed his palms against his eyes until he saw stars. A knock on the office door. Miguel poked his head in. "Boss, you okay?" "Yeah, fine. What's up?" "There's a guy here asking about his estimate from last week. The Chevy Silverado. Says he's ready to move forward if we can start today." The Silverado. A full engine rebuild. Legitimate work. The kind of job that paid $3,000 and could keep them afloat another month. Marcus had given the estimate thinking it was too good to be true, and here it was, materializing exactly when he needed it most. "Tell him I'll be right there." He splashed water on his face in the bathroom, practiced a smile in the mirror that looked almost convincing, and headed to the waiting room. The Silverado's owner was a contractor in his 50s with calloused hands and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who worked with his hands for a living. They shook, talked specs, agreed on a timeline. $3,000. Half up front, half on completion. Marcus should have felt relief. Instead, he felt the weight of math. $1,500 up front minus $1,200 for the parts supplier to restore his account minus $340 for the electric bill left exactly nothing for the mortgage, the insurance, or the dozen other debts circling like sharks. The contractor left. Miguel was watching him with concern. "We got the job," Marcus said. "That's good, right?" "Yeah, real good." Miguel didn't look convinced, but he nodded and went back to the tire rotation. Marcus returned to the office and did the math on paper, hoping it would look better in writing. It didn't. No matter how he arranged the numbers, they told the same story. 30 days until foreclosure, and no realistic way to come up with $47,000. He could take out a personal loan, except his credit was destroyed from keeping the business afloat this long. He could ask family for help, except Roberto had been an only child, and Marcus's mother had died when he was 6. There were cousins somewhere, but they'd never been close. He could sell the business, except who buy a failing auto shop with outdated equipment and crushing debt. The property was worth something. The lot sat on a corner in a neighborhood that was slowly gentrifying, but selling meant betraying everything his father had built. Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled to the photos. There was one from 3 years ago. Him and his dad at Christmas. Roberto wearing a ridiculous elf hat, both of them laughing at something stupid. His father looked happy. Looked proud. "Make me proud, son." "I'm trying, Dad," Marcus whispered to the empty office. "I'm really trying." His phone alarm went off. 11:30. He had to meet the woman from the highway in half an hour. Marcus grabbed his jacket, told Miguel he was taking lunch, and stepped out into a world that suddenly felt too bright, too loud, too full of people who weren't carrying 30-day foreclosure notices in their desk drawers. The diner was 3 blocks away. He walked slowly, trying to remember what normal conversation felt like, trying to be someone who wasn't quietly falling apart. By the time he pushed open Rosie's door, he'd almost convinced himself he could fake it. Then he saw her sitting in a booth by the window, and something in his chest went still. She looked different in daylight, put together, almost elegant despite the casual clothes. And when she smiled at him, it was like being recognized by someone who actually saw him. Maybe, Marcus thought, normal conversation wasn't what he needed. Maybe he just needed to be seen. Sofia Castellano woke in a bed the size of most people's studio apartments, surrounded by 600 thread count sheets that felt like sleeping on a cloud, and wanted to scream. The ceiling above her was hand-painted with a mural of cherubs and clouds, some Italian master her father had commissioned, probably cost more than a car. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Castellano estate sprawled across 40 manicured acres, gardens designed by the same landscape architect who did the Getty Museum, a tennis court she never used, a pool house larger than most actual houses, and beyond it all, the Pacific Ocean glittering like scattered diamonds. She hated every beautiful inch of it. Sofia threw off the covers and padded barefoot across imported marble to her bathroom, which featured a soaking tub, a rainfall shower, heated floors, and a mirror that still reflected the same lonely woman no amount of luxury could fix. She'd driven out to that deserted highway 3 nights ago specifically to be alone, to be anonymous, to be anyone except Vincent Castellano's daughter for a few hours. Then her car had died, and a stranger had stopped to help. She couldn't stop thinking about him. The mechanic, Marcus, she'd learned from the name embroidered on his work shirt, had looked at her broken car the way most people in her life looked at her bank account. Like it was a problem to solve, something fixable with the right tools and enough effort. He'd gotten soaked fixing her battery terminal, refused payment, and disappeared into the storm like some kind of folklore hero. It had felt real in a way nothing in her life felt real anymore. Sofia, dressed in yoga pants and a cashmere sweater that cost more than she wanted to think about, then headed downstairs to the kitchen, where the morning chef was preparing breakfast for one. Her father would be in his study already, on his 3rd cup of coffee and his 15th phone call. Vincent Castellano didn't sleep so much as pause briefly between world-changing decisions. "Just coffee, please, Marcus," she told the chef, then froze. "I mean Martin." "Sorry." Martin smiled politely, pretending not to notice. The staff was good at that, pretending not to notice the cracks in the perfect facade. She took her coffee to the East Terrace and called the one person she trusted to tell her the truth. "It's 7 in the morning," her best friend Adriana answered, voice thick with sleep. "Someone better be dead. I need you to find someone for me." "Sofia." "No. We talked about this. After the last disaster. This is different. It's always different. Remember the artist who turned out to be running an investment scam? Or the entrepreneur who pitched your father a business idea on your 2nd date? Or a mechanic stopped to help me when my car broke down. He didn't know who I was. He didn't want money. He just helped. Silence. Then, you're serious. I need to know if he's real." Adriana sighed. "Give me what you have." Sofia rattled off the details. Highway 17, midnight. Work shirt said, Chen's Auto, first name Marcus, drove an old pickup truck. It wasn't much, but Adriana had connections that made private investigators look like amateurs. I'll call you back in 2 hours, Adriana said and hung up. Sophia spent those 2 hours trying to work. She technically ran the Family Foundation's arts education program, though was generous when you had a staff of 12 doing the actual work. She reviewed grant applications, approved budgets, and answered emails from people who called her Ms. Castellano and wanted things from her father. Her phone rang at exactly 9. Chen's Auto Repair on 5th Street, Adriana said without preamble. Owner-operator Marcus Chen, 32, inherited the business from his father 4 years ago. No criminal record, no significant debts. Actually, scratch that, he's got significant debts. Business is struggling. Lies above the shop. Reputation in the community is basically saint level. Fixed Mrs. Rodriguez's transmission last week for whatever cash she had in her purse. Sponsors Little League teams. He can't afford to sponsor. Last tax return shows he barely made minimum wage after expenses. Sophia's chest tightened. He's drowning. Financially? Absolutely. But here's the thing. I talked to 3 people who know him. Not one bad word. Heart of gold. Would give you his last dollar. Just like his father. Sophia, I've been doing background checks for you for 5 years. This guy is either a genuinely good person or the world's greatest con artist. Which do you think? I think good people don't usually stop on deserted highways at midnight to help strangers. But I also think you should be careful. Sophia ended the call and sat staring at her phone. Chen's Auto Repair. 5th Street. A 20-minute drive from the estate. But it might as well be another planet. She found her father in his study, surrounded by computer monitors showing stock tickers, news feeds, and video conferences with people on 3 continents. Vincent Castellano was 61, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and relentless. He built a tech fortune in the 90s, pivoted to sustainable energy in the 2000s, and now ran a charitable empire that moved $500 million a year to causes he deemed worthy. He was also, in his own distant way, trying to be a good father. Sophia, what can I do for you? She told him about the mechanic. Not the part about driving alone at midnight to escape the suffocation of wealth, but the rest. The broken car. The stranger who helped. Her curiosity about whether people like that still existed. Vincent listened with the intense focus he brought to everything, then swiveled to his keyboard and typed rapidly. Marcus Chen. Chen's Auto Repair. I'm looking at his financials now. Underwater by about 60,000. Property tax delinquent. Facing foreclosure in, he scrolled, approximately 30 days. Dad, that's invasive. That's due diligence. You're interested in this person. I want to know why. He kept reading, his expression shifting from analytical to something softer. Interesting. He donated free repairs to the women's shelter last year despite being in the red. Testified as a character witness for one of his customers in housing court. Pays his assistant more than market rate for apprentice work. Vincent looked up. He's either foolish or principled, or both. Often the same thing. Her father steepled his fingers, a gesture Sophia recognized from childhood. It meant he was formulating a plan. The foundation has been looking for someone to lead our community investment program. Someone who understands what struggling neighborhoods actually need, not what consultants think they need. Someone with integrity who can't be bought. Sophia's pulse quickened. You're thinking of offering him a job? I'm thinking he might be exactly what we've been searching for. Or he might be a disaster. But your instinct about people is usually sound. He smiled. Better than mine, anyway. I married your mother. It was an old joke between them, softened by time and her mother's absence. Patricia Castellano had left when Sophia was 12, choosing freedom over fortune, and neither of them blamed her anymore. I want to meet him first, Sophia said, without the Castellano name attached. Just to see if he's who you think he is, if he's real. Vincent nodded slowly. Be careful, Mija. Good people can still hurt you. Sometimes especially good people. Sophia left the study and drove to 5th Street in her second car, a modest Honda, nothing that screamed money. She parked across from Chen's Auto Repair and watched through the window. There he was, Marcus, working under the hood of a minivan, grease on his forearms, completely focused. A younger guy, his assistant, probably handed him tools. An older woman sat in the waiting area with 3 kids who were destroying a pile of magazines, and Marcus glanced over, smiled at something one of the kids said. He looked tired. He looked stressed. He looked like someone carrying weight he wouldn't let anyone else hold. Sophia sat in her car for 20 minutes, working up courage she shouldn't need. Finally, she dialed the shop's number from her burner phone, the one she used when she didn't want to be Vincent Castellano's daughter. He answered on the 3rd ring. Chen's auto. She recognized his voice instantly. Warm. Genuine. A little rough around the edges. Hi, I'm calling to. This might sound strange, but I'm trying to reach the mechanic who helped me last night on Highway 17. There was a pause. Then, that was me. Her heart did something stupid. I wanted to thank you properly. You wouldn't take payment, but I'd like to at least buy you coffee or something. You saved me from a really terrible night. She could hear the hesitation, the internal debate. Then, coffee sounds good. They arranged to meet at Rosie's diner the next day at noon. Sophia hung up and pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, breathing carefully. This was probably a mistake. She built a life around protecting herself from people who wanted things from her, and here she was, chasing down a stranger who'd shown her basic human kindness. Adriana would say she was setting herself up for disappointment. Her therapist would say she was conflating loneliness with connection. But neither of them had seen the way Marcus looked at her broken car, like it mattered that she got home safe, like her well-being was worth getting soaked in a thunderstorm, like helping people was just what you did when you could. Sophia started her car and drove back to the estate, already planning what to wear to a diner where nobody would know her name. For the first time in months, she felt something like hope. Rosie's diner had been serving coffee and lies about homemade pie since 1987. The booths were cracked red vinyl, the floor was checkerboard linoleum that had seen better decades, and the coffee tasted like it had been brewed during the Nixon administration. Marcus loved everything about it. He arrived 5 minutes early, which gave him just enough time to feel self-conscious about the grease still embedded under his fingernails despite 20 minutes of scrubbing. He changed into his least stained jeans and a button-down shirt that had belonged to his father, which fit poorly but felt like armor. Then she walked in, and Marcus forgot about his fingernails entirely. She looked different than she had on the highway, put together in that effortless way some people managed, wearing jeans and a simple blouse that probably cost more than his monthly grocery budget, though he couldn't have said why he knew that. Her dark hair was pulled back, and when she spotted him and smiled, something in his chest did a complicated maneuver he hadn't authorized. "Hi," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "I wasn't sure you'd actually come. I said I would. People say a lot of things." She picked up a menu, scanned it. "What's good here?" "The coffee's terrible. The pie's frozen. The burgers are the best thing you'll eat all week." She laughed, and it sounded genuine. "Burgers it is." The waitress, Dolores, who'd been working at Rosie's since before Marcus was born, took their orders with the efficiency of someone who'd stopped caring about customer service around the time the Berlin Wall fell. When she left, an awkward silence settled over the table. Sophia broke it first. "I really am grateful. For the other night, I was starting to panic when you pulled over. Anyone would have stopped. We both know that's not true." She met his eyes. "What were you doing out there at midnight anyway? Heading home from work?" "Late job." He didn't mention it had been a 14-hour shift because the air conditioning unit had died, and he'd spent 3 hours fixing it with parts he'd scrounged from the junkyard. "What about you?" She hesitated, and Marcus recognized the look the calculation people made about how much truth to share. "Just driving. Needed to clear my head. Dangerous time for head clearing. Apparently. Though it worked out okay." She smiled again. "You mentioned your dad. He's a mechanic too." "Was? He passed 4 years ago." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He had a good life. Built something that mattered." The words tasted like ash, but Marcus kept his expression neutral. "Left me the shop. I'm still figuring out how to fill his shoes." "I'm sure you're doing fine." Marcus thought about the foreclosure notice in his desk drawer and said nothing. Dolores returned with burgers that looked like they'd been assembled by someone who'd forgotten what food was supposed to look like. Sophia stared at hers with barely concealed horror. "Trust me," Marcus said. She took a bite, and her eyes widened. "Oh my God! Told you!" They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Marcus watched her navigate the burger. She was trying to be polite about it, using a knife and fork until she gave up and just picked it up with her hands. Something about that felt important, like she was letting down a guard she usually kept raised. "So what do you do?" Marcus asked. "When you're not breaking down on highways?" Another hesitation. "I work for a nonprofit. Arts education, mostly. Making sure kids have access to music and art programs." "That's good work." "It's something." She wiped her hands on a napkin. "What about you?" "Always wanted to be a mechanic. Didn't have much choice. Grew up in that shop. My dad used to put me to work soon as I could hold a wrench." Marcus smiled at the memory. "But yeah, I love it. There's something satisfying about fixing things. Someone comes in with a problem, you solve it. Concrete. Simple. Doesn't sound simple. Simpler than people, anyway. Cars don't lie to you." She studied him with an intensity that made him shift in his seat. "You really believe that? That helping people is simple?" "I believe it's necessary. Simple's got nothing to do with it. Even when it costs you." The question landed too close to home. Marcus took a drink of terrible coffee to buy himself time. "My dad had this saying, when you can help, you help. He lived by that. Died by it too, kind of. Worked himself to death, making sure everyone else was taken care of." He set down his mug. "I used to think it was stupid. Now I think it's the only thing that makes sense." "That's beautiful. And terrible. Most important things are both." Sophia was quiet for a moment, pushing fries around her plate. "Can I ask you something? The other night, when you wouldn't take money, was that pride or principle? Does it matter?" "Maybe. Pride can hurt you. Principle just hurts." Marcus laughed despite himself. "That's dark. But true." "Yeah." He met her eyes. "It was both, probably. Pride that I could help without needing payment. Principle that some things shouldn't have a price tag. And maybe a little bit of stupidity, since I'm not exactly flush with cash." "Are you okay? Financially?" The question should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt like someone actually seeing him for the first time in months. "Getting by. Shop struggling, but it always has been. We make it work." "What happens if you don't?" "Make it work." Marcus wanted to lie, to keep up the facade of competence and control. But something about her expression, open, genuinely concerned, made him want to tell the truth. "Then I lose everything my father built. But I'm not going to let that happen." "How?" "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. I always do." It was a lie, but he said it with enough conviction that maybe it would become true. Sophia reached across the table and touched his hand, just briefly, just long enough for Marcus to feel the warmth of her skin against his. "I believe you." They talked for another hour, about everything and nothing. She told him about growing up wanting to be a dancer until a knee injury ended that dream. He told her about his mother dying when he was 6, leaving just him and his dad against the world. She mentioned traveling, Paris, Tokyo, places Marcus had only seen in movies. He talked about the neighborhood, the families who depended on the shop, the kid he was training who reminded him of himself at that age. She didn't mention her last name. He didn't push. When the check came, they fought over it briefly before Marcus won, by virtue of grabbing it first. $15 for both burgers. He left 20 and told Dolores to keep the change, aware that Sophia was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Outside, the afternoon sun felt too bright after the diner's dim interior. They stood on the sidewalk, neither quite ready to leave. "Can I see you again?" Sophia asked. Marcus's heart did that complicated thing again. "Yeah, I'd like that. Thursday. There's a food truck festival in the park. Very casual. Very not fancy. Perfect." She smiled, and for a moment Marcus forgot about foreclosure notices and overdue bills and the weight of his father's legacy pressing down on his shoulders. For a moment, he was just a guy who'd met a woman, and she was just a woman who seemed to actually like him, and the world was simple in a way it hadn't been for a very long time. "Thank you for lunch," she said. "Thank you for tracking me down. It was worth it." She walked to her car, a modest Honda that surprised him somehow, though he couldn't have said what he'd expected. He watched her drive away, then stood there on the sidewalk for another minute, trying to figure out what had just happened. His phone buzzed. Miguel, parts supplier, called. They're cutting us off until we pay the balance. What do you want me to tell them? Reality crashed back in like a bucket of ice water. Marcus typed back, "Tell them we'll have it by end of week." He had no idea how he'd make that happen. But for the first time in months, he had something to look forward to that wasn't just survival. Thursday couldn't come fast enough. The black town car pulled up to Chen's auto repair on a Tuesday morning like a spaceship landing in a junkyard. Marcus was elbow deep in a Subaru's engine when Miguel tapped his shoulder, eyes wide. "Boss, you need to see this." Through the bay door, Marcus watched a driver in an actual suit open the rear door of what looked like a Mercedes S-Class. The man who emerged wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marcus's truck, silver hair perfectly styled, moving with the kind of confidence that came from never having to check a price tag in his entire life. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag that only made them dirtier. "Can I help you?" The man extended his hand. "Vincent Castellano. I was hoping we could talk." The name hit Marcus like a physical thing. Castellano. As in Castellano Foundation. As in the buildings with that name all over the city. As in billionaire philanthropist Vincent Castellano, whose face occasionally showed up in the newspaper's business section. Marcus shook his hand, acutely aware of the grease he was probably transferring. "Marcus Chen. This is about a car." In a manner of speaking, Vincent glanced around the shop with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. "Is there somewhere we could speak privately?" Miguel was staring like he'd seen a celebrity. Marcus gestured toward the office. "It's not much." "That's fine." They squeezed into the closet-sized space, Vincent somehow making even the cramped office look dignified by his presence. He didn't sit in the folding chair Marcus offered, just stood examining the photos on the wall, Roberto with customers, Roberto at community events, Roberto and young Marcus covered in grease and grinning. "Your father?" Vincent asked. "Yeah, he built something meaningful here." Marcus felt defensive and wasn't sure why. "We do okay. Actually, you're 3 months from foreclosure. Your parts supplier has cut you off. You're running on fumes and goodwill, and while goodwill is admirable, it doesn't pay mortgages." Vincent turned to face him fully. "My daughter told me about what you did, helping her on Highway 17. The world tilted sideways. Your daughter, Sophia, she's been quite impressed with you." Marcus sat down heavily in his desk chair. Sophia Castellano. Of course. The way she'd moved, the way she talked, that calculation about how much truth to share, it all made horrible sense now. She didn't mention that. She wanted to know if you were genuine. Apparently you are. Vincent pulled a business card from his pocket, set it on the desk between them. "I run a foundation that moves approximately $500 million annually to various causes. Community development, education, healthcare access. We're looking for someone to lead our community investment program. Someone who understands what struggling neighborhoods actually need because they've lived it." Marcus stared at the card. Castellano Foundation. Director of Community Investment. A phone number in embossed gold. "I don't understand." "The position pays $250,000 annually, plus full benefits, discretionary budget for initiatives you deem worthy, and the authority to direct millions toward causes that matter. You'd be working with communities like this one, identifying needs, building programs, making a genuine difference on a scale your shop can't achieve." The number hung in the air like smoke. $250,000. Marcus made $32,000 last year after expenses. "Maybe." "Why me?" "You don't know me." "I've done my research. I know you testified in housing court for Mrs. Rodriguez when her landlord tried to evict her. I know you fixed vehicles for the women's, shelter free of charge despite being underwater financially. I know your reputation in this neighborhood is impeccable. I know your father built this shop on the principle that people matter more than profit, and you've continued that tradition, even when it's killing you." Vincent's expression softened slightly. "And I know that in about 30 days, you're going to lose everything unless something changes." Marcus felt stripped bare. "You investigated me. I investigate everyone I'm considering for important positions. Due diligence isn't personal, it's necessary." Vincent gestured at the foreclosure notice sitting on top of the pile of bills Marcus hadn't bothered to hide. "This offer solves your immediate problems and gives you the resources to help thousands of people instead of dozens. This is charity. This is a job offer for a position we've been trying to fill for 8 months. The last 3 candidates were consultants with impressive resumes and no actual understanding of the communities they be serving. Sophia suggested you. I reviewed your background. You're qualified in ways that matter more than a business degree. Marcus stood, needing to move, needing air. I can't just abandon the shop. Your father's legacy is helping people, not this building. With the salary we're offering, you could pay off your debts, keep the shop as a community service, hire someone to run it properly. Or you could let it go and help exponentially more people through the foundation. Vincent's voice was gentle but firm. What would your father actually want? His son drowning to maintain a monument, or his son thriving while serving others on a larger scale? It was a good question. Marcus hated how good it was. I need time to think. You have 30 days until foreclosure. I'd suggest thinking quickly. Vincent moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Sophia's instinct about people is rarely wrong. She saw something in you worth pursuing. I trust her judgment. Does she know that you're here? This is my decision, but yes, she knows I was considering the offer. Whether you accept or not won't change her opinion of you. Vincent's expression turned almost fatherly, though I'd suggest being honest with her about why you're hesitating. She's dealt with enough people who lie to her. After Vincent left, the town car gliding away like a sleek black dream, Marcus sat in his office staring at the business card. Miguel appeared in the doorway. Was that really Vincent Castellano? Yeah. What did he want? To offer me a job. Miguel's eyes went wide. Doing what? Running one of his foundation programs. $250,000 a year. Holy shit. Boss, that's life-changing money. I know. So you're taking it, right? Marcus looked at Miguel's hopeful face, thought about Mrs. Rodriguez and the families who depended on them, thought about his father's photo on the wall, thought about Sophia not mentioning she was a billionaire's daughter. I don't know. Miguel stared at him like he'd grown a second head. You don't know? Marcus, you're about to lose everything. This guy just handed you a winning lottery ticket. It's not that simple. Why not? Because accepting felt like admitting defeat. Because taking money from Vincent Castellano felt like charity, no matter how he dressed it up as a job offer. Because the shop was the last physical piece of his father he had left. Because Sophia had lied to him, or at least hidden the truth, and now everything about their lunch felt calculated. Because he was scared. Just give me time to think, Marcus said. Miguel left shaking his head. Marcus pulled out his phone, stared at Sophia's number. She texted him that morning. Still on for Thursday? He'd responded, looking forward to it. That was before he knew she was Sophia Castellano. Before her father had walked into his shop with an offer that felt too good to be real. Marcus typed out a message, "We need to talk." Then deleted it. Typed, "Did you know your dad was coming here?" Deleted that too. Finally, he just turned off his phone. The Subaru was still waiting in the bay, engine half disassembled. Work he could understand. Work had clear problems and clear solutions. You diagnosed, you fixed, you moved on. People were messier. Marcus went back to the engine, trying to lose himself in spark plugs and timing belts and things that made logical sense. But Vincent's words kept echoing in his head. What would your father actually want? He worked until his hands stopped shaking, until the sun started setting, until Miguel went home, and the shop was quiet except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. Then Marcus pulled out the foreclosure notice and Vincent's business card and laid them side by side on his desk. 30 days until he lost everything. One phone call to save it all. And a woman he'd started to care about who'd been lying to him, or at least not telling the whole truth, since the moment they met. Marcus picked up the business card, turned it over in his grease-stained fingers, and tried to figure out what the hell he was supposed to do now. Marcus didn't sleep that night. Or the next. By Wednesday morning, he'd run the numbers, so many times the calculator on his phone probably needed therapy. No matter how he arranged the equation, the answer was the same. He was broken, and running out of time. The envelope from the bank arrived Thursday morning, thick and official, and final notice stamped across the front in red ink that looked like blood. Marcus opened it standing in the shop's tiny bathroom, door locked, hand shaking. Foreclosure proceedings to commence. 28 days. 28 days. Not even a month. Less time than it took most people to break a bad habit, and Marcus had to figure out how to save his entire life. He splashed cold water on his face and went back to work because work was the only thing that made sense anymore. Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter, younger Mrs. Rodriguez as everyone called her, came in around 10 with her Honda, making a grinding noise that turned out to be a worn brake pad about to fail catastrophically. The repair would cost $200 in parts and labor. She counted out $73 in small bills on the counter, eyes already apologizing. I get paid next Friday. I can bring the rest then, I promise. Marcus thought about Vincent Castellano's offer. $250,000 a year. More money than he could properly imagine. Enough to fix every car in the neighborhood and never worry about getting paid. Don't worry about it, he heard himself say. Consider it an early Christmas present. She teared up. He pretended not to notice. Miguel cornered him during lunch, which was a protein bar Marcus ate standing up because sitting down felt like admitting defeat. My mom's in the hospital, Miguel said quietly. Marcus's stomach dropped. What happened? That cold she wouldn't see a doctor about? Turns out it was pneumonia. They admitted her this morning. Miguel's voice cracked. She doesn't have insurance. They're saying the bill's already at $4,000 and climbing. For $1,000. The Silverado job would bring in $3,000. Marcus was already planning to use that money for the parts supplier and the electric bill, which would leave exactly nothing for Miguel's mother and still nothing for the foreclosure. Take whatever time you need, Marcus said. Family first. And don't worry about the hospital bill. We'll figure it out. Miguel looked at him with an expression somewhere between gratitude and pity. Boss, you can't keep doing this. You can't save everyone. Watch me. After Miguel left, rushing to the hospital with fear written all over his face, Marcus sat in the office and did something he'd been avoiding for weeks. He called around to banks about loans. The first 3 rejected him outright. Bad credit, insufficient collateral, too much existing debt. The 4th bank, a small local place that did business with a lot of struggling enterprises, told him they could maybe do something, but he'd need a co-signer with better credit and substantial assets. Marcus had neither. He was staring at his father's photo, trying to figure out what Roberto would do, when his phone rang. Sophia. He'd been dodging her texts since Tuesday. She'd sent 5 messages, each one more concerned than the last. Are we still on for today? Did I do something wrong? Marcus, please just tell me if you're okay. He should have called her back. Should have confronted her about the lies, or omissions, or whatever billionaires called it when they pretended to be normal people. Instead, he buried himself in work and debt and the growing certainty that he was failing at everything that mattered. The phone rang 4 times. 5. He let it go to voicemail. 2 hours later, she showed up at the shop. Marcus was under a Toyota Camry when he heard heels clicking on concrete, an unusual sound in a place where most customers wore sneakers. He rolled out from under the car to find Sophia standing in the bay, dressed in jeans and a blouse that somehow looked both casual and expensive, her expression a mix of worry and anger. "You've been avoiding me," she said. "I've been busy. Don't lie to me, Marcus. I've had enough people lie to me to know what it looks like." She crossed her arms. "What happened? My father came to see you, didn't he?" "Yeah, your father. Vincent Castellano. Billionaire philanthropist. Would have been nice to know that detail before I spilled my guts to you over burgers." Sophia flinched. "I wanted you to see me as a person, not as a name. So you lied. I omitted. There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing." Marcus stood, wiping his hands on a rag, needing something to do with them. "You investigated me. Had your people dig into my finances, my reputation, probably my dental records for all I know. Then you sat across from me in that diner and pretended like we were just 2 normal people having a conversation. We were 2 normal people having a conversation. My last name doesn't change that. It changes everything. Your father shows up offering me a $250,000 job because his daughter thinks I'm a good guy. That's not a job offer, Sophia. That's charity wrapped in a suit. It's a legitimate position. That you recommended me for after one lunch." Marcus's voice rose despite himself. "You think I don't see what this is? Poor struggling mechanic gets rescued by the rich girl and her daddy's foundation. It's a fucking fairy tale, and I'm not interested in being your charity case." The words hung between them like smoke. Sophia's expression went from hurt to angry to something harder, colder. "You're an idiot," she said quietly. "Excuse me. You're drowning. My father threw you a life preserver. And you're so busy being proud that you'd rather drown than accept help from someone who might actually care about you. You don't know me well enough to care about me. I know you stopped on a highway at midnight to help a stranger. I know you're working yourself to death, trying to honor your father's legacy. I know you just gave Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter free break work because she could only afford half the bill. I know all of this because I paid attention, Marcus. Because I wanted to know who you really are. By investigating me like I'm some kind of project. By trying to help you." Sophia's composure cracked. "Do you have any idea how rare it is to meet someone genuine? Someone who doesn't want anything from me except maybe a conversation over terrible diner coffee? You were real, Marcus. And I thought—" She stopped, collected herself. "My father's offer is legitimate. The foundation needs someone like you. Someone who actually understands the communities we're trying to serve. But if your pride is more important than accepting help, then I was wrong about you." She turned to leave. "Sophia, wait. No. You've made yourself clear. Good luck saving your shop, Marcus. I hope your pride keeps you warm when you're losing everything your father built." She walked out, heels clicking sharp and angry against the concrete. A moment later, her car started and pulled away. Marcus stood in the empty bay feeling like he'd just taken a wrench to something important and couldn't figure out how to put it back together. His phone buzzed. "Miguel, Mom's stable, but they're saying she needs to stay at least 3 days. Bill's at $7,200. Another text immediately after. "I know you said not to worry, but I'm worried. I can't ask you to pay this." Marcus stared at the messages, then at the bank notice in his pocket, then at the photo of his father still watching from the office wall. 28 days until foreclosure. $7,000 for Miguel's mother. $200,000 in existing debt. And he just pushed away the one person offering him a way out. His phone rang again. Unknown number this time. Marcus almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Chen? This is Leonard Kozlov. I'm a private lender. I understand you might be in need of some financial assistance." The voice was smooth, professional, with just enough sympathy to sound genuine. Marcus had heard that tone before. Salespeople, debt collectors, people who made money off desperation. "How did you get this number?" "Word gets around in certain circles when businesses are struggling. I like to reach out, see if I can help. I specialize in quick loans for entrepreneurs facing temporary setbacks. No credit checks, minimal paperwork, funds available within 48 hours. Every instinct Marcus had screamed that this was a bad idea. But $7,000 for Miguel's mother. $8,000 for the foreclosure. The parts supplier. The electric bill. The mountain of debt that kept growing no matter how hard he worked. What kind of terms are we talking about? Why don't we meet? Tomorrow morning, say 9 o'clock? I can come to your shop. We can discuss your options face to face. Marcus should have said no. Should have hung up and called Vincent Castellano and swallowed his pride and accepted help from people who actually wanted to help him. Instead, he said, 9 o'clock works. He hung up and immediately felt sick. But feeling sick was better than feeling helpless, and right now helpless was all he had left. Leonard Kozlov arrived at exactly 9 o'clock in a BMW that was nice enough to impress, but not so nice that it screamed predator. He was 50-something, well-dressed in business casual, with the kind of smooth handshake that came from a lifetime of closing deals. Everything about him said trustworthy professional, which should have been Marcus's first warning. They sat in the office, Kozlov's briefcase open on the desk between them, papers spread out like a promise. "I've reviewed your situation," Kozlov said, his tone sympathetic. "Inherited business, struggling economy, mounting debts. It's a story I see too often, unfortunately. Good people crushed by circumstances beyond their control." Marcus nodded, already feeling the relief of being understood. "I can offer you $50,000. Enough to clear your immediate debts, cover your employee's family emergency, and give you breathing room to get back on your feet." Kozlov slid a paper across the desk. "The terms are simple. 12% interest, 36-month repayment period, monthly payments of approximately $1,600. 12% was high, but not insane. $1,600 a month was manageable if business picked up. Marcus scanned the contract, seeing words like collateral and secured loan and property interest, but his brain was too tired to process the fine print. The number 50,000 kept jumping out at him like salvation. "What's the catch?" Marcus asked. "No catch. Just standard loan security. The property serves as collateral, which allows me to offer better rates than you'd get elsewhere given your credit situation." Kozlov smiled reassuringly. "Think of it as a partnership. I'm investing in your success." Marcus should have read every word. Should have taken it to a lawyer. Should have slept on it, thought it through, done literally anything except what he did next. He signed. Kozlov countersigned, notarized the documents with a stamp he pulled from his briefcase, and wrote Marcus a check for $50,000 like it was nothing. "Congratulations, Mr. Chen. First payment is due in 30 days. They shook hands. "I have faith you'll turn things around." After Kozlov left, Marcus sat staring at the check, feeling something like hope for the first time in weeks. $50,000. He could pay off the foreclosure, cover Miguel's mother's hospital bills, restore his account with the parts supplier, catch up on utilities. He could breathe. He deposited the check that afternoon and immediately started paying bills. The rush of watching numbers in his account actually go up instead of down was intoxicating. He paid the hospital in full. Miguel almost cried when Marcus told him. He paid the parts supplier, the electric company, sent a large payment to the bank to stop foreclosure proceedings. By the end of the day, he had $4,000 left and felt like a king. That evening, cleaned up and wearing his best shirt, Marcus did something he'd been thinking about for days. He drove to Sophia's apartment, an address Miguel had found with some creative internet searching, and knocked on her door. She answered in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked beautiful and annoyed. "Marcus, I'm sorry. For what I said. For being an ass. You were right. I let pride get in the way of seeing what you were actually offering." Sophia leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. And I want to take you to dinner. Real dinner, not diner burgers. Let me make it up to you. You can't afford real dinner. I can now. I solved my financial problems. Got a loan, paid off my debts. Well, most of them. I'm back on solid ground. Something flickered across her face. Concern, maybe, or doubt. "What kind of loan?" "Private lender. Guy named Kozlov. Gave me $50,000 at 12%. Marcus smiled, feeling proud of himself for the first time in months. "I handled it. On my own terms." Sophia's expression darkened. "Marcus, no. Private lenders who target struggling businesses. Those are predatory loans. Did you read the entire contract?" "I read enough." "Did you have a lawyer review it?" "I didn't need a lawyer. It's straightforward. 12% interest, 3-year term, property as collateral. Property as collateral means if you default, he takes the building." "Did you see any clauses about balloon payments? Acceleration? Variable interest?" Marcus felt his stomach start to sink. "It's fine, Sophia. I know what I'm doing." "Do you?" "Because from where I'm standing, you just made the biggest mistake of your life because you were too proud to accept help from people who actually want to help you. This is different. This is me solving my own problems. This is you drowning slower while pretending you're swimming." Sophia's voice softened. "Marcus, please, let my father's lawyers look at that contract. If it's legitimate, great. But if it's what I think it is, I don't need your father's lawyers. I don't need rescuing. I just needed to handle my business like an adult." Marcus heard his voice rising and couldn't stop it. "Not everyone wants to be saved by billionaires, Sophia. Some of us want to stand on our own 2 feet. Standing on your own 2 feet is different from stepping off a cliff out of spite. I'm not doing this out of spite. I'm doing this because it's my life, my shop, my choice." Marcus stepped back from the door. "Forget dinner. I thought you'd be happy for me, but I guess I was wrong." He walked away before she could respond, feeling righteous and angry and absolutely certain he'd made the right choice. That certainty lasted exactly 3 weeks. The first payment notice arrived on day 28. Marcus opened it expecting to see $1,600. Instead, the letter stated, "Balloon payment due, $8,500. He read it 3 times, certain there was a mistake. He pulled out his copy of the contract, the one he'd shoved in a drawer and hadn't looked at since signing, and actually read it this time. There, in section 4.2, in print so small he needed his reading glasses, initial balloon payment of 17% of principal due on day 30, followed by standard monthly payments for the remainder of the term. 17% of $50,000 was $8,500. In 2 days, Marcus called Kozlov immediately. The smooth voice answered on the second ring. Mr. Chen, how can I help you? The payment notice says I owe $8,500. The contract said $1,600 a month. The contract says $1,600 a month after the initial balloon payment. It's all there in section 4.2. I'm sure you read it before signing. I can't pay $8,500 in 2 days. I understand that's difficult. However, the contract also stipulates that failure to make the balloon payment triggers the acceleration clause. The full loan becomes due immediately. Marcus felt ice in his veins. What does that mean? It means if you can't pay $8,500 by day 30, the entire $50,000 becomes due immediately. And if you can't pay that, which I suspect you can't, given that you've already spent most of it, then per section 7.3, I assume ownership of the collateral property. You can't. I can, Mr. Chen. You signed a legally binding contract. My lawyer is very good at writing legally binding contracts. Kozlov's voice lost its sympathetic tone. You have 48 hours. Either come up with $8,500 or start packing. I have a developer very interested in that corner lot. Thinks it would make an excellent mixed-use development. Condos, retail space, very profitable. The line went dead. Marcus sat in the office, his father's office, the office he was about to lose, staring at the contract he'd been too proud and too desperate to read properly. Every clause was there in black and white. Balloon payment, acceleration clause, property seizure terms, all legal, all enforceable, all his fault. He pulled out his phone and stared at Sophia's number for a long time. She tried to warn him. She'd offered to help. He'd thrown it back in her face because his pride was more important than his common sense. Marcus put the phone down without calling. Instead, he walked into the shop bay and started methodically destroying his father's office. He threw the filing cabinet against the wall, swept everything off the desk, put his fist through the drywall and felt bones crunch and didn't care. Miguel found him sitting in the wreckage, hand bleeding, surrounded by scattered papers and broken furniture. Boss! Jesus, what happened? Marcus laughed, and it sounded unhinged even to his own ears. I'm what happened. I had a way out and I was too fucking proud to take it. And now I'm going to lose everything in 48 hours. He told Miguel everything. The loan, the contract, the balloon payment, the acceleration clause, Kozlov's plan to demolish the shop and build condos. Miguel listened in silence, then pulled out his phone. What are you doing? Marcus asked. Calling someone who can actually help you, since you're apparently too stupid to do it yourself. Marcus heard the phone ringing. Then Sophia's voice. Miguel. He needs you. The shop, actually. Can you come? A pause. Then, I'll be there in 20 minutes. Miguel hung up and looked at Marcus with something between pity and frustration. You're going to sit there, and you're going to let her help you, and you're not going to say one word about pride or independence or any of that bullshit. Understood. Marcus nodded, too defeated to argue. 20 minutes later, Sophia walked into the destroyed office, took one look at Marcus's bleeding hand and devastated expression, and sat down next to him in the wreckage. She didn't say, I told you so. She just took his hand, the uninjured one, and held it. Okay, she said quietly. Let's fix this. Sophia made 3 phone calls while sitting in the wreckage of Roberto Chen's office. The first was to her father's head of legal. The second was to someone she called the best contract attorney in the state. The third was to Vincent himself, her voice clipped and professional in a way that made Marcus realize he'd never actually heard her in business mode before. I need you to look into a lender named Leonard Kozlov, she said. Predatory loans targeting small businesses. Yes, I'll send you the contract. How fast can you move on this? She listened, then glanced at Marcus. 48 hours is all we have. When she hung up, Miguel had materialized with a first aid kit, wordlessly cleaning and bandaging Marcus's hand while Sophia photographed every page of Kozlov's contract with her phone. The silence was heavy with things unsaid. "The attorney will review it tonight," Sophia finally said. "My father's team is investigating Kozlov's business practices. If there's anything illegal or unenforceable in that contract, we'll find it." "And if there's not?" Marcus asked. His voice sounded hollow. "Then we find another way." "There is no other way. I spent the loan money. I can't pay him back. In 2 days, he owns the building." Marcus looked at his bandaged hand, flexed his fingers, felt the ache. "I did exactly what you warned me not to do." "Yes, you did. You're not going to say, 'I told you so.'" Sophia met his eyes. "Would it help?" "No." "Then what's the point?" She stood, brushing dust off her jeans. "Miguel, can you give us a minute?" Miguel looked at Marcus, who nodded. When they were alone, Sophia walked to the photo still hanging crookedly on the wall, Roberto and young Marcus, Roberto with customers, Roberto accepting some community service award. "Tell me about your father," she said. "Why?" "Because I want to understand why you'd rather lose everything than accept help." Marcus leaned back against the desk he'd knocked over, too tired to stay angry. He built this place from nothing. Came to this country with barely any English and a dream about honest work and serving people who needed him. He could have made more money doing corporate fleet maintenance or working for a dealership, but he wanted to be here, in this neighborhood, fixing cars for people who couldn't afford anyone else. That sounds like a good man. He was the best man I've ever known. And when he got sick, he worked until he physically couldn't anymore because stopping meant letting people down. He died worried about what would happen to Mrs. Rodriguez and the Yamamoto family and all the other people who depended on him. Marcus's throat tightened. His last words to me were, "Take care of them." Not take care of yourself, or sell the shop and move on. Take care of them. So you've been destroying yourself trying to honor a deathbed promise. I've been trying to be the man he was. By refusing help? By drowning in pride. Sophia turned to face him. "Marcus, do you think your father never accepted help? Never had people support him when things got hard? That's different." "How?" Marcus opened his mouth to argue and found he didn't have an answer. Sophia sat down next to him on the floor, among the scattered papers and broken furniture. "I grew up with everything. Literal everything. Private schools, European vacations, a trust fund that could buy this neighborhood twice over. And I was desperately lonely because everyone wanted something from me. The Vincent Castellano connection, the foundation money, access to power and wealth. That must have been terrible," Marcus said, unable to keep the sarcasm out. "It was actually. You know what the worst part was? Never knowing if people actually liked me or just what I could give them." She picked up a piece of broken picture frame, turned it over in her hands. "Then I met you. A guy who stopped to help a stranger on a highway and refused payment. Who didn't know my name or my father or what I could offer. You were just kind. Because that's who you are. So you investigated me. So I wanted to know if you were real. And you were. You are." Sophia set down the frame. "And then my father offered you a legitimate job. Not charity, Marcus. A real position that you're actually qualified for. And you threw it back in our faces because accepting help felt like weakness. It felt like losing myself." "No. Losing yourself is becoming so obsessed with independence that you sign a predatory loan contract without reading it. Losing yourself is pushing away people who care about you because you're too proud to be vulnerable." Her voice cracked slightly. "I wasn't trying to save you like some project. I was trying to, I don't even know, connect with someone real for once in my life." Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't Sophia Castellano, Billionaire's daughter, in this moment. She was just a woman sitting in the ruins of his life, choosing to be here when she could be literally anywhere else. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for what I said, for pushing you away, for being too stupid to see what you were actually offering. An apology doesn't fix the contract. I know, and it doesn't change the fact that in 48 hours, you're losing this place. I know that too." Sophia's phone buzzed. She checked it, and her expression shifted. The attorney found something. Kozlov's contract violates California's predatory lending statutes. The balloon payment clause combined with the acceleration terms qualifies as unconscionable. We can challenge it. Hope flickered in Marcus's chest. We can stop the foreclosure. We can try. But Marcus, Even if we get the contract voided, you'll still owe money to the people you paid with Kozlov's loan. The bank, the hospital, the suppliers. You'll be right back where you started, just without the immediate threat of losing the building. So I'm still drowning, just in shallower water. Unless you accept my father's offer. There it was. The life preserver he kept refusing out of pride and fear and stubbornness. What if I'm not good enough for it? The words came out smaller than he intended. What if I accept and I fail? What if I take the job and discover I'm just a mechanic who's good at fixing cars but terrible at everything else? Sophia took his bandaged hand in both of hers. What if you're exactly what the foundation needs? What if you take the job and help thousands of people instead of dozens? What if being your father's son means having the courage to grow beyond what he built while honoring why he built it? Marcus thought about Roberto, about the photos on the wall, about take care of them, and what that really meant. His father had never said, take care of the building, or take care of my legacy. Just them. The people. If I accept the job, Marcus said slowly, I want to keep part of the shop running. Small scale. Community service. A place where Miguel can teach kids about car repair, where people who can't afford dealers can still get honest work done. That's doable. With your salary, you could fund it yourself. And I want to pay back everyone I owe. Clean slate. No debt hanging over my head. Also doable. And I want. He met her eyes. I want to take you to dinner. Real dinner. And I want you to be honest with me about who you are, and I promise to be honest about who I am, including the parts that are scared and broken and still figuring it all out. Sophia smiled, and it reached her eyes for the first time since she'd walked into the shop. I'd like that, even though I'm an idiot who signs contracts without reading them. Especially because of that. At least you're an honest idiot. Marcus laughed, and it felt like breaking the surface after being underwater too long. So what happens now? Now we call my father's attorney and file an emergency injunction to stop Kozlov from taking the property. Then you call Vincent and accept his offer. Then we save your shop, clean up this mess, and figure out what comes next. She stood, pulling him up with her. But first, let's get you some ice for that hand before it swells up completely. They walked out of the destroyed office together, and for the first time in weeks, maybe months, Marcus felt like he wasn't carrying the weight alone. Miguel was waiting in the bay, looking worried. So, what's the plan? The plan, Marcus said, is I stop being too proud to accept help from people who actually give a damn. About time, Miguel muttered. Sophia was already on the phone with the attorney, her voice sharp and commanding. Marcus watched her pace the shop floor, gesturing emphatically, every inch the billionaire's daughter she'd been hiding. It should have intimidated him. Instead, it made him realize that she'd chosen to sit with him in the wreckage. She'd chosen to help despite him being an ass. She'd chosen him, mess and all. Maybe accepting help wasn't weakness. Maybe it was just letting people love you the way you deserve to be loved. His phone rang. Vincent Castellano. Marcus took a deep breath and answered. Mr. Castellano, I'd like to accept your offer. If it's still available. It is. Welcome to the team, Marcus. We'll discuss details tomorrow. For tonight, focus on stopping Kozlov. My people are already on it. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You've got real work ahead of you. But I think you're ready for it. After he hung up, Marcus stood in the center of his father's shop, battered, broken, but still standing, and felt something shift in his chest. Not failure. Not defeat. Just the beginning of something different. Something that might actually be better. The emergency injunction came through at 2 a.m. Sophia called Marcus with the news, her voice hoarse with exhaustion and relief. The judge had found sufficient evidence of predatory lending practices to freeze Kozlov's claim on the property, pending a full hearing. They had time, not much, but enough to breathe. Marcus thanked her and hung up, but sleep wouldn't come. He lay on the futon staring at the South America-shaped water stain on his ceiling, thinking about choices and consequences and the difference between honoring legacy and being buried by it. At 3 a.m., he gave up on sleep and went downstairs to the shop. The bay was dark except for the security lights casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Marcus walked through it slowly, trailing his fingers along the workbench his father had built, the tool chest with Roberto's initials still visible through decades of wear, The lift that had hoisted thousands of cars and held up despite being older than Marcus himself. Every inch of this place held memories. Roberto teaching 10-year-old Marcus the difference between a Phillips and flathead screwdriver. The two of them working late on Christmas Eve to fix a single mother's van so she could drive her kids to her parents' house. His father's laugh echoing off these walls, his hands always moving, always fixing, always helping. Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled to a video he'd taken 6 months before Roberto died. In it, his father sat in the office before Marcus had destroyed it, looking thin but smiling, talking to the camera like he knew he wouldn't be around much longer. Mijo, if you're watching this, I'm probably gone. And you're probably killing yourself trying to keep this place running exactly the way I did. Roberto's voice was rough but warm. Stop it. The shop was never the point. The building, the sign, the tools, none of it matters except for what we did with it. We helped people. That was the point. Always. He paused, coughed, continued. You remember Mrs. Yamamoto? When her husband died and she couldn't afford to fix her car, what did I do? Marcus heard his own voice off camera. You fixed it for free. Wrong. I fixed it for free, and then I helped her find a job that she could get to with that car. And when she got her first paycheck, you know what she did? She brought you tamales. She brought me tamales, and she paid it forward. Fixed her neighbor's car when it broke down. That's legacy, Marcus. Not the building. Not the business. The ripples we make in people's lives. Roberto leaned forward, looking directly into the camera. So if keeping the shop open means you're drowning, let it go. Find another way to make those ripples. I'll be proud of you either way. I'm already proud of you. You understand? The video ended. Marcus had watched it 100 times, but tonight it hit different. His father wasn't asking him to preserve a monument. He was asking him to preserve a principle. And you could do that anywhere, with any resources in any building. You could do it with a foundation that moved $500 million toward helping people. Marcus sat in his father's chair, the one piece of furniture he hadn't destroyed, and pulled out a notebook. He started writing, sketching out a vision that had been forming in his head since Vincent's offer. What if he took the foundation job but kept a corner of the shop running? A small operation, maybe 3 bays instead of 6. Miguel could manage it, teach neighborhood kids the way Roberto had taught Marcus. They could still do the community work, free repairs for families in crisis, honest pricing for everyone else, but without the crushing overhead of keeping the entire building operational. The rest of the space could become a foundation satellite office, a place where people could come for resources, job training, financial counseling. They could run programs out of the building that had meant community support for 30 years. Different services, same mission. His father's legacy evolved. By the time the sun rose, Marcus had filled 12 pages with ideas. Programs for job training, partnerships with local schools, microgrants for small businesses. All the ways money could actually help people when it was directed by someone who understood what they needed. Someone like him. Miguel arrived at 7:30 to find Marcus making coffee in the shop's break room, the notebook open in front of him. You look like you didn't sleep, Miguel said. I didn't, but I figured some things out. Marcus slid the notebook across the table. How would you feel about running a smaller version of the shop? 3 bays, community-focused, no pressure to make huge profits because it'd be subsidized. Miguel read through the pages, his eyes getting wider. This is boss, this is amazing. But what would you be doing? Taking the foundation job, using the salary to keep this place running the way my dad intended, but also helping on a bigger scale. I'd be here on weekends, teaching with you, keeping my hands in the work. But during the week, I'd be out there making sure other neighborhoods have what we built here. So you're accepting Castellano's offer? Yeah, I am. Miguel grinned. About damn time. The full staff meeting with Vincent and the foundation board was scheduled for Monday. Marcus spent the weekend reading everything he could find about community development, reviewing the foundation's existing programs, and preparing himself for a world he knew nothing about. Sunday evening, Sophia texted, nervous? Marcus replied, terrified. Good. Means you care. Pick you up at 8 tomorrow. I can drive myself. I know you can. But I want to be there. If that's okay. Marcus stared at his phone for a long moment before typing, yeah. That's okay. Monday morning arrived bright and cold. Sophia pulled up at exactly 8 in a car that probably cost more than Marcus had made in the last 3 years. She looked professional in a way that reminded him of their different worlds. Tailored suit, perfect makeup, hair styled like she had people for that sort of thing. Then she smiled at him through the window, and she was just Sophia again. The Castellano Foundation occupied 3 floors of a downtown high-rise with views of the ocean and furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. Marcus felt profoundly out of place in his one good suit, his father's suit, actually altered to fit but still smelling faintly of Roberto's cologne. Vincent greeted them in a conference room that could have held Marcus's entire shop. "Marcus, good to see you. Ready as I'll ever be." The board meeting was exactly as intimidating as Marcus had feared. 12 people in expensive suits asking questions about his qualifications, his vision for community investment, his thoughts on measurable outcomes and sustainable impact. Marcus answered honestly, drawing on 30 years of watching his father help people, adding his own ideas about what communities actually needed versus what looked good in grant applications. Halfway through, one of the board members, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a sharper suit, interrupted him. "Mr. Chen, you have no formal education in social work, urban planning, or nonprofit management. Why should we trust you with directing millions of dollars in community investment?" Marcus took a breath. "Because I've lived it. Because I know what it feels like to choose between paying the electric bill and helping someone who needs help more than you do. Because I've watched good people get crushed by systems that weren't designed for them, and I've spent my life figuring out how to fix those problems one car at a time." He looked around the room. "You're right that I don't have the credentials. But I have something better. I have the perspective of the people you're trying to help. And I promise you, I won't waste a single dollar on programs that sound good in board meetings but don't actually change lives." Silence. Then the woman smiled. "That's the best answer I've heard from a candidate in 10 years. You have my vote." The meeting ended with handshakes and welcome aboard congratulations. As they left, Vincent pulled Marcus aside. "You did well in there. Better than I expected. Thanks. I think. My daughter speaks very highly of you. She's rarely wrong about people." Vincent's expression grew serious. "This job isn't charity, Marcus. It's hard work. You'll make mistakes. You'll face criticism. People will question whether you deserve to be here. I'm used to that." "Good. Use it as motivation." Vincent extended his hand. "Welcome to the foundation. Make us proud. More importantly, make yourself proud." Marcus shook his hand, feeling the weight of what he'd just accepted. Sophia was waiting in the lobby, trying not to look anxious. When she saw his face, she broke into a smile. "You got it. I got it." She hugged him, right there in the marble-floored lobby with strangers walking past. Marcus held her, breathing in her perfume, feeling for the first time like maybe he could actually do this. They went to dinner that night, real dinner at a restaurant with cloth napkins and wine lists, and Marcus told her everything. About the video from his father, about the plan for the shop, about being terrified of failing but more terrified of not trying. "You won't fail," Sophia said. "You don't know that. I know you. That's enough." 6 months later, Marcus stood in what used to be Chen's auto repair and barely recognized it. 3 bays still operated as a community garage, with Miguel teaching a class of teenagers how to change oil while maintaining dignity and charging fair prices. The rest of the building had been transformed into a foundation resource center, job training, financial counseling, after-school programs, everything his father would have loved. Above the door, a new sign, Roberto Chen Community Center, powered by the Castellano Foundation. Mrs. Rodriguez was first in line on opening day, tears streaming down her face. "Your father would be so proud, Mijo." Marcus thought about Roberto's video, about ripples and legacy, about the difference between preserving the past and honoring it. "I hope so, Mrs. Rodriguez. I really hope so." That evening, he and Sophia drove out to Highway 17, parking on the shoulder where they'd first met. The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky in colors that didn't have names. "You did it," Sophia said. "Saved the shop, took the job, changed your life. We did it. I couldn't have done any of it alone. You could have. You just didn't have to." She took his hand. "That's the difference." Marcus thought about that, about the difference between capability and necessity, between independence and isolation. about how accepting help hadn't made him weaker. It had made him more than he could have been alone. "Hey, Sophia." "Yeah. Thank you. For stopping that night. For tracking me down. For not giving up on me, even when I was being an idiot." She smiled. "You're welcome. Thank you for stopping to help a stranger in the rain." "When you can help," Marcus said, echoing his father's words, "you help. And when someone offers to help you." Marcus looked at her, this woman who'd seen him at his worst and chosen to stay, who believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself, who'd shown him that accepting love and support wasn't weakness but wisdom. "You let them," he said. "You let them help, and you become more than you ever could alone." Sophia kissed him as the sun disappeared below the horizon, and Marcus thought about all the ways a single choice could change everything. Stopping on a rainy highway, accepting an offer, choosing to trust instead of drowning in pride. His father's legacy wasn't the building or the business, or even the name above the door. It was this, the courage to help, and the wisdom to be helped. And Marcus Chen was just getting started. The first year was harder than Marcus expected, and easier than he feared. He started at the foundation on a Tuesday morning in October, walking into an office on the 23rd floor with floor-to-ceiling windows and a desk made of some sustainable wood he'd never heard of. His assistant, he had an assistant now, an efficient woman named Patricia, who knew more about nonprofit logistics than Marcus knew about anything, handed him a schedule that made his head spin. Budget meetings, site visits, grant review panels, community listening sessions. "Don't worry," Patricia said, reading his expression. "You'll get used to it, or you'll have a nervous breakdown. Either way, you'll adapt." She wasn't entirely wrong. The first community he visited was in East Oakland, a neighborhood that reminded him painfully of his own. Struggling families, shuttered businesses, that particular exhaustion that came from working 3 jobs and still falling behind. The foundation had been running a job training program there for 2 years with mediocre results. Marcus spent a week just listening. Talked to residents in laundromats and corner stores and bus stops. Asked what they actually needed instead of what the foundation thought they needed. Discovered that the job training was teaching skills for jobs that didn't exist in their neighborhood and required transportation they couldn't afford. He redesigned the entire program. Partnered with local businesses to create apprenticeships. Added childcare support so single parents could actually attend training. Built-in transportation stipends. Made it about what worked for them, not what looked good in annual reports. 6 months later, the program had placed 43 people in stable jobs. The foundation board was impressed. Marcus was just relieved he hadn't screwed it up. The hardest part wasn't the work, it was the imposter syndrome that followed him like a shadow. Every board meeting, every presentation, every decision that moved hundreds of thousands of dollars, Marcus felt like someone would eventually realize he was just a mechanic playing dress-up in his dead father's suit. Sophia helped with that. She'd show up at his office unannounced with coffee and reality checks. "You approved funding for 3 new community health clinics today," she'd say. "Thousands of people will get health care because you understood what they needed. Stop acting like you don't belong here. I approved funding. The board approved funding. Your father approved. You wrote the proposal. You identified the need. You built the partnerships. Own it, Marcus." He was learning to own it. The shop, the 3 bays that remained, became his sanctuary. Every Saturday morning, Marcus showed up in his old work clothes and helped Miguel teach teenagers how to rebuild engines and charge fair prices and understand that fixing cars was about fixing trust. Some of the kids were from families the foundation helped. Some were just neighborhood kids who needed purpose and a place to belong. One Saturday, a 15-year-old named David asked why Marcus still came around when he had that fancy job downtown. Marcus thought about it, tightening a bolt on a transmission they were rebuilding. "Because this is where I learned who I am, and I don't want to forget." "My dad says you sold out," David said, not unkindly. "Just honest. Maybe I did. Or maybe I figured out how to help more people by accepting help myself." Marcus wiped his hands on a rag. "What do you think?" David considered this, the way teenagers did when you treated their opinions like they mattered. "I think your dad would be proud. My dad's just mad because he wishes someone would give him a fancy job. Tell your dad to come see me. We've got job training programs. If he's serious about wanting work, we can help." The next week, David's father showed up. 6 months later, he had a union job doing HVAC installation. David told everyone his boss was magic. Marcus just told him about systems and opportunities and the ripple effects of actually helping instead of just feeling bad about problems. Sophia moved into his apartment above the shop 6 months into his new job, which was insane because her penthouse had a view of the ocean and his place had a view of an alley. But she claimed she liked the realness of it, the way sirens echoed at night and the smell of engine oil drifted up through the floorboards. "This feels like a life people actually live," she said, unpacking designer clothes into his closet that had previously held 3 shirts and 2 pairs of jeans. "Not a movie set where I'm playing the role of a person." They fought sometimes. About work-life balance when Marcus pushed himself too hard. About her tendency to solve his problems with money when he needed to solve them himself. About whose turn it was to do dishes when they were both exhausted from trying to save their respective corners of the world. But they loved each other in the gaps between the fighting, in the quiet moments over morning coffee, in the way she understood why he still kept his father's toolbox in the bedroom, even though he barely used it anymore. A year and a half into the job, Marcus got a call from Leonard Kozlov's lawyer. The predatory lending case had finally gone to trial, and Kozlov had been found guilty of multiple violations. He was being fined, his lending license revoked, and he was required to make restitution to everyone he defrauded. "You'll be receiving a check for the full amount of the loan plus damages," the lawyer explained. Approximately $72,000. Marcus donated it all to a legal aid fund for small businesses fighting predatory lenders. Kept none of it. When Sophia asked why, he just shrugged. "That money was never really mine. It was always a trap. Better to turn it into something that actually helps people avoid the trap I fell into." She kissed him for that, long and slow, like she was proud of him. 2 years in, the foundation promoted Marcus to Senior Director of Community Investment. His salary increased to $320,000 a year, a number that still made him vaguely nauseous when he thought about it too hard. He used the raise to expand the Roberto Chen Community Center, adding a second location across town, and a third in the neighborhood where he'd grown up. Miguel became the official director of the original center's auto program, training a new generation of mechanics who understood that their real job was fixing trust, not just cars. He hired 2 assistants, both kids from the neighborhood who reminded Marcus of himself at that age, hungry and hopeful and willing to work. Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter started working at the foundation as a community liaison, bridging the gap between what the foundation offered and what people actually needed. She was brilliant at it, having lived both sides of that divide. Vincent Castellano pulled Marcus aside at the foundation's annual gala, an event where Marcus still felt uncomfortable in a tuxedo but had learned to fake it. "You've exceeded every expectation," Vincent said. "The board wants to expand your division. Double the budget, triple the staff. You'd be overseeing community investment across 5 states. Marcus felt the familiar flutter of imposter syndrome. "That's a lot of responsibility. You're ready for it. More importantly, the communities you serve are ready for someone who actually understands them." Vincent smiled. "My daughter was right about you. She usually is. Where is she anyway? Probably hiding from the small talk. She hates these events even more than you do." Marcus found Sophia on a balcony overlooking the city, champagne in hand, staring at lights that stretched to the horizon. "Hiding?" he asked. "Strategically retreating." She leaned against him. "Your big news travel fast. 5 states. Very impressive, Mr. Chen. Terrifying, Miss Castellano. You'll be great. You always are." She turned to face him. "Remember when I broke down on Highway 17 and some random mechanic stopped to help?" "Vaguely." She laughed. "I thought you were just a kind person. Turns out you were so much more than that. You were someone who understood that helping people was the whole point, not the side effect. The point. My dad taught me that. And you're teaching it to thousands of others now. That's legacy, Marcus. The real kind." They stood on the balcony watching the city breathe, lights flickering on and off in windows, cars moving along distant streets, millions of people living lives that intersected and diverged in patterns too complex to map. Somewhere down there, someone was struggling the way Marcus had struggled. Someone was drowning in debt and pride and the weight of inherited expectations. And now Marcus had the resources to throw them a life preserver. The foundation expanded. The The community centers multiplied. Marcus learned to wear suits without feeling like an imposter and make decisions that moved millions of dollars without second-guessing every choice. He learned to accept that he belonged in rooms with powerful people because he represented the voices of people who never got into those rooms. 3 years after that rainy night on Highway 17, Marcus and Sophia got married in a small ceremony at the Roberto Chen Community Center. Miguel was his best man. Mrs. Rodriguez cried through the entire service. Vincent gave a toast about how his daughter had always had impeccable judgment about character. They honeymooned in Italy, Sophia's choice, but cut it short because Marcus got anxious about missing a community listening session in Sacramento. Sophia didn't complain. She just rescheduled the rest of the trip and went with him to Sacramento, sitting in a folding chair in a community center that smelled like industrial cleaner, and listened to residents talk about what they needed. That night in their hotel room, she asked him if he was happy. Marcus thought about it. Really thought about it. "Yeah," he said. "I think I am. Not all the time. Sometimes I still feel like I'm failing my dad or pretending to be someone I'm not or drowning in responsibilities I didn't ask for. But mostly, yeah, I'm happy. Good. Because I'm happy too. And I think your father would be proud." "I hope so." 5 years after the rainstorm, Marcus stood in the original Chen's Auto Repair, now the Roberto Chen Community Center flagship location, and watched 20 teenagers graduate from the automotive training program. They'd learned to rebuild engines and balance books and treat customers with dignity. Half of them already had job offers. The other half had plans to start their own businesses. Miguel gave a speech about legacy and opportunity. Sophia presented the certificates. Marcus stood in the back and remembered his father's hands, showing him how to hold a wrench, teaching him that the work was never really about cars. After the ceremony, an elderly Japanese man approached him. "Mr. Yamamoto." He'd been one of Roberto's first customers, 35 years ago. "Your father was a good man," Mr. Yamamoto said. "He helped my family when we had nothing. Fixed our car, helped us find work, treated us like family." He gestured at the community center, the kids celebrating their graduation, the resources available to anyone who walked through the door. This is what he dreamed of. Bigger than he could build alone, but true to everything he believed. Marcus's throat tightened. "Thank you. That means everything." He would be proud, not because you became successful, because you became kind in your success. That's rare. That night, Marcus drove out to Highway 17. Sophia came with him, like she always did when he needed to think. They parked on the shoulder where it had all started, where a broken car and a stranger's kindness had set in motion a chain of events that changed everything. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd just driven past that night?" Sophia asked. "Every day. Regret it? Not even a little bit." They sat in comfortable silence, watching cars pass in the darkness, each one carrying people with their own stories, their own struggles, their own moments of choice between stopping and driving past. Marcus thought about his father's voice on that video, the ripples we make in people's lives. That's legacy. He'd made ripples, still making them, would keep making them for as long as he could. "Hey, Sophia." "Yeah. Thank you for breaking down that night." She laughed. "Thank you for stopping." They drove home together, back to the life they built from one act of kindness in a rainstorm. Back to work that mattered and love that sustained, and the knowledge that accepting help hadn't made Marcus weaker. It had made him whole. And Roberto Chen's legacy, the real legacy, the one that mattered, lived on in every person Marcus helped, every community he served, every kid who learned that fixing things meant fixing lives. When you can help, you help. And when someone offers to help you back, you let them. That was the whole story. Everything else was just details.